In this first segment, we're going to talk about linking staffing goals to organizational performance. Competitive advantage is a concept that underpins all of human resource management, and in particular staffing organizations, which is the focus of this course. The very first part of the chapter begins with a description of competitive advantage. This particular concept underpins all of human resource management and in particular staffing organizations, which is the context of this whole course. And so when we look at competitive advantage, it's something that an organization does that sets them apart from everyone else. And in industry, a lot of times it's either the service industry or innovation, you're looking at people being the major source of competitive advantage. A great example of competitive advantage is Starbucks. One of the organizations that's talked about in the text is Starbucks. This is the largest coffee house in the entire world. They have the opportunity to be a lot like Walmart in that they're so huge they can become disconnected from the customer. But when you look at Starbucks, they differentiate themselves based on the types of coffee and the finest coffee in the world. And the other part that differentiates them is their employees. They're looking at their employees to build long-term relationships with the customers. They want to maintain those relationships, and they want them to feel at home, have an emotional attachment to the organization when they come in. Feels like family. And so when you think about Starbucks, one of their areas of competitive advantage is their employees. So if the employees are the ones who build relationships with the customers and the organization is using this as part of their competitive advantage, then it makes sense that the employees who have the first line contact with the customers become the core jobs. So exactly what is a core job? Phillips and Gulley in Strategic Staffing talk about how employees are the ones who influence and implement key drivers of success in the business. The authors also talk about how employees are the ones who influence and implement key drivers of success in the business. And they go on to specify it may be a particular department, finance or marketing or research and development. What they're really talking about here is core jobs. So core jobs are the jobs that are typically the drivers of competitive advantage. And when we're looking at staffing organizations, these jobs are typically the ones that get the bulk of the budget and the bulk of the focus. So while, yes, we're trying to staff all of the jobs in the organization, it's typically the ones that are related to the core jobs that we focus on the most. Phillips and Gulley also talk about how effective staffing is the cornerstone of effective human resource management. And what they're really talking about are successful human resource management programs. And the reason for that is because if you hire a really good stock of employees, then the types of programs and processes that you're going to develop are going to support a higher level of employee engagement. Whereas if you're hiring employees who are not an adequate fit for the company or an adequate fit for the job, then the systems, process, and programs that you're developing to support those employees are going to be more basic. Can we orient you to the company? Can we get you to perform adequately? Can we improve your job performance so that you're meeting minimum standards? And so the types of programs that we spend our money and time on will be determined by the quality of employee that we hire. And when we look at the quality of employee that we're hiring, we're really talking about staffing goals. So when we talk about staffing goals, one of the very basic questions is, did we hire somebody? And did we hire the right person? So these are some of the concerns with staffing goals. When we look at staffing goals, we're saying, did we have a good fit with the organization? Did we have a good fit with the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that we want in the person for that particular job? And how do we know that we got the right person? How long did it take to fill that particular job? How long did it take for that person to become productive in the job that they have? And did we retain that person? So going back to, did we hire the right person? if we didn't retain that person, there's turnover, then we didn't hire the right person to begin with. And of course, all of these questions about staffing goals relate back to competitive advantage, where we started out. So if this is the service industry or innovation, how well did the person we hire fit our needs for competitive advantage? So how do we know this? How do we know if they had the right KSAOs? And how do we know if they met our need for competitive advantage? The authors indicate that staffing professionals bring expertise to the workforce planning and staffing processes, including evaluating what jobs require, identifying competencies, skills, personalities, and so forth, which are required for job success, and assessing those characteristics in job applicants. The job analysis, this is going to tell you what the right KSAOs are so that when you're advertising and recruiting, you're bringing in the right types of applicants. Phillips and Gulley talk about how strategic staffing is different from traditional staffing. And when we talk about how staffing is related to organizational performance, this is key. In the beginning I referenced the service industry and organizations who focus on research and development as part of their competitive advantage. So when you're thinking about the strategic staffing versus the traditional staffing, generally organizations that are in a low pace of change industry view a more traditional staffing pattern as appropriate, and that's because things change so slowly, jobs change so slowly, that the idea of recruiting and strategic recruiting is not one of their highest priorities. Generally, a different function of HR is a higher priority. But for any organization that is relying on people as a competitive advantage, or that is relying on keeping up to date with the pace of change. So when we talk about a high pace of change industry, that would be anything that relies on technology. Technology is constantly changing. And so if we know that technology is changing, the jobs are going to change. If the jobs are going to change, staffing is going to change. So we have to have a more strategic perspective on staffing when we know that we are in a high pace of change industry. In this video, I've talked about competitive advantage, core jobs, staffing goals, and high pace of change industries. These are all concepts you need to know in this course.